people on the other side manipulate events. We call them coincidences. Sometimes you're driving along and you hear a song, or you open a drawer that you looked in 1,000 times and like, oh my gosh, there's that thing I was looking for, and now you're thinking of them. Sometimes people see it on clocks, 11:11 on a digital clock. The truth is, no one prior to digital clocks went around going, it's 11 minutes after 11. But they do now because they see it and they get a ping. It's almost like their loved ones are saying, hey, pay attention.
I am very happy to have Richard Martini with us today. Richard, thank you for being my guest. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Tia, what a treat to meet you. I can't believe you're living all the way down in Georgia. I think it's fascinating that your Zoom just changed my background to outer space, whereas a minute ago I was in a forest. But that's fine, no worries. So, for your audience who's never met me before, hello and welcome to Tia's podcast. I'm Rich Martini. I've been a filmmaker for the past, I don't know, long time. I've written and or directed like 9 theatrical feature films, but most recently documentaries about the afterlife, because about 15 years ago, a friend of mine who had passed away many years ago started showing up and started visiting me. And at first I was in denial, like, what could that be? What is that? I must be making that up. But then other people reported seeing her exactly as I saw her as a younger person. And I thought, okay, well, if she can visit me, then how do I visit her? Is there a method? And I stumbled, it's kind of a fun story, it's in the book Flipside. I stumbled into the research of a hypnotherapist named Michael Newton. And Michael Newton had written Journey of Souls and a bunch of other stuff. And I thought, oh, great, I'll make a documentary about this guy because, maybe that's a key. And so I reached out to the Newton Institute and they said, no, he's retired. I said, oh, okay. They said, well, we're giving a conference in Chicago, my hometown, in the summer, so you can bring your cameras. And I thought, great, I'll go and see if this is real or fake, or because the camera, and being a jaded filmmaker, camera kind of reveals whatever it is that's going on, whether you want it to or not, right? So I showed up in Chicago, and I met Michael, and he said, well, I'm retired. I don't really do interviews anymore. And then after talking to me for a little bit, he said, I'm going to give you my last interview, which was unusual because he didn't pass away for another 16 years, but it was the last filmed interview with him. So for 3 hours, I pretty much asked him everything I had learned about him and his life. And I interviewed his wife, which was another way to verify certain things that he said. But the most important thing was that he didn't believe in a past life or an afterlife or whatever. That wasn't part of his rubric. But he did have an experience where a doctor, a friend of his, sent him a patient that had a psychosomatic illness, a shoulder pain, that he couldn't figure out how to cure. And so Michael said, well, under hypnosis, take me to the source of your pain, thinking it would be like, a truck, something he fell down as a kid or something. And he was being stabbed in World War I by a German soldier, and he was a British soldier. And Michael, who didn't believe in past life regression, grilled this poor guy and said, what's your name? What's your rank? What's your serial number? What's your mother's maiden name? What street did you grow up on? Because he just didn't believe it. He said it was kind of funny, this poor guy's, being stabbed and suffering, and he's asking all these questions about his journey. And then afterwards, unbeknownst to the client, he sent all of that information to the British War Office, and they wrote back and said this guy did exist, and this is his name and rank and serial number, etc. It was all accurate. So that opened up his practice to hypnotherapy, and 7,000 cases or 7,000 reports later, Michael published Journey of Soul. So I'm there filming people talking about their previous lifetimes. It's in the film Flipside and the book Flipside. But at some point they said, Rich, you want to try one yourself? And I thought, great, I can prove this to be wrong, because I didn't think I could be hypnotized. I wasn't convinced there was an afterlife or before life or anything beyond my conscious mind. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. Here we are today. So I not only saw, a previous lifetime, I was able to forensically look it up and examine it and learn things about it. And the point is, I've been really doing that for 15 years. But I also discovered, because I took my research to the University of Virginia, where they, DOPS, the Department of Perceptual Studies, where they study consciousness. And they said, Rich, I'm sorry, but hypnosis is not really a valid scientific tool because of bias, because people want to have a past life, or the doctor is being paid to show them a past life. And so it's a problem of bias. But they also talked about near-death experiences, which they had been studying scientifically. And so I expanded what I was doing into talking to people I knew who had a near-death experience, and then having them do a hypnotherapy session, not with me, but with a hypnotherapist, often trained by the Newton Institute, where I'd film them accessing the near-death event. And by doing so, they could learn more details. So the idea being, if they were making it up, then the details wouldn't match everyone else's. And this is something I pointed out to these scientists, which is across the planet, people were reporting the same hallmarks, the same things about guides and teachers and councils, even seeing avatars, or, religious individuals, in the research. And so how do you account for that? Because it couldn't be bias, if everybody's saying the same things, you see? So that allowed me to sort of open up the scope. And then somewhere about 8 years ago, a medium who works with law enforcement out here in Los Angeles, Jennifer Schaefer, reached out to me, and we had a conversation. I didn't really know what it was that she was doing. I was like, what? What's a medium? I don't understand that. I mean, it's not my cup of tea. Like, what is that? And, that just shows you how you can really wake up to things. But I realized, because she's very good at what she does, I realized it fits with the research. People report we have filters on the brain that block awareness, and that if we can bypass the filters, which we might do through a near-death experience, out-of-body experience, or guided meditation, very simple, way to bypass the filters. Some people use hallucinogens. Some people have a near-death experience, out-of-body experience, a dream, where they see a loved one. Now, seeing a loved one doesn't mean that they still exist, but when the loved one gives you new information, I left my keys in the trunk of the car. That's where they are. I mean, you could argue that somewhere you heard it, saw it, somebody else said it, but when you get new information, it's a way of verification. Anyway, so to skip down a little bit, what I've been showing people is that you can use guided meditation to do the same thing, which is to invite someone to come and talk to you, and playing a game, almost like a video game. You play the game, you invite their avatar to come and sit with you, but then you start looking at what you've created. Now, for example, if you saw a loved one, then you ask them to come and sit with you, and you look at their clothing. If it's clothing, that makes sense. That's the same t-shirt he always wore, or that's the same jeans that looks normal to me. Sometimes people see something quite different, clothing they've never seen before. Like a grandmother who passed away, they're seeing her at a young age, like in her 30s, and wearing something they've never seen. And so the question then becomes like, well, who's creating this? Because if you've never seen it and you've never seen these clothing this before, why are they wearing that? And you can ask them questions. That's what I've realized. It's not a hard thing to do. And if you just allow that it's a game, I'm going to play this game with my loved one. We're going to play 20 questions, and I'm going to put you across from me, and I'm going to ask you questions. And you can ask anything, basically, but I suggest asking questions that you don't know the answer to. Like, and they do, like who greeted them when they crossed over? Not something you and I would know, or they do know. And sometimes you'll hear an answer, or you hear usually it's not hearing because it's so hard to create sound, but it might be a visual. So you say, well, Grandma, who greeted you when you crossed over? And then you see an image of Grandpa. And you go, oh, well, that's, yeah, of course. And I call that judging it. Just try not to judge the answer, whatever it is. Sorry, my phone, turn my phone off. So, try to let whatever they say be the answer and not judge it. And then I ask follow-up questions. Well, how was that? Because, we might consciously know grandma and grandpa didn't like each other or they were divorced. And then you say, so how was that? Was that a happy reunion? And because your conscious mind is going, it couldn't have been. He would have they would have been wrestling with each other. But they almost always say, oh yeah, at first it was disconcerting, but then I realized, oh, this is a play. This is somebody from my play that I had my lifetime, and I see the connections and why we got together. It's almost like you get a download of all the information that we don't have access to on the planet. So why don't we have access to it on the planet? That's the question. And scientifically, and that's kind of what I try to focus on, like I say, the University of Virginia, they've done a lot of research in this area of consciousness. And Dr. Grayson's book called After, Grayson, a lot of near-death experiences, but his book After talks about filters on the brain, that the brain has these defense mechanisms built into it. You see a shark, you want to go the other way, even if you've never seen a shark before. But the point is, you have certain things that are sort of, you can call them genetically done so that you have fear, or constructed so that you have certain reactions to things. And these filters have blocked this information that exists because it's not conducive to survival. So it's almost like, let's just put it simply, humans used to be able to talk to trees and animals, but they forgot how. And it's not like they were too busy doing something, but the filters allowed them to forget how, so that they could focus on, building cities, building civilization, and doing what people do. But we can bypass those filters. So how do you do that? Some children, as you know, don't have them until the age of 8. I'm sure you probably heard about them and met them, whatever. People who remember previous lifetimes, or they see somebody in the room that nobody else sees. Grandma's here. And you're like, no, they're not. They're dead. I buried them. And they're like, no, grandma's standing right over there saying, you really should, whatever. We deny because our filters are up. However, elderly people lose the filters. As Dr. Grayson notes, there's a study, 70% of the UK hospice care workers, their dementia clients, patients, spontaneously recovered memory just prior to passing. So suddenly, yesterday they didn't know who anybody was, and then suddenly today they know everybody in the room. And they're seeing people that aren't in the room. It's as if the filters die with the atrophied brain. And that's a quote from Grayson in his YouTube talk, Is Consciousness Produced by the Brain? There's a link on our podcast, Hacking the Afterlife, on YouTube. If you're a science person and you want to hear data behind what I'm talking about, as opposed to, this thing that scientists like to use the word woo-woo, which is so funny. It's like a grade school word. Like, why talk like a toddler when you're talking about consciousness? Anyway, my little bugaboo. There's another fun word. But anyway, look, I've talked nonstop. Go ahead, Tia. What do you got?
I find this fascinating that you are able to help people overcome these filters so that they can communicate with their loved ones. And I mean, I don't feel like there's any other stronger validation in this world that we still exist after death than to actually communicate with someone that we know and that we love that's on that other side.
It's still there. Well, I liken it to skydiving, because people have an opinion about what skydiving is. I've never gone, so I think it's like flying. But some people think it's like swimming, and some people say it's like falling with grace. Well, I'm thinking of Toy Story. What did he say? It's falling with, whatever. But it's an opinion and a belief and a theory until you step out of the plane. And once you do that, it's an experience. So when people have an experience with seeing a loved one, hearing new information from a loved one, having a near death experience, meeting avatars off planet, interdimensional creatures, I mean, it all has to do with filters on the brain not being aware of it. And you can understand why it's logical that we wouldn't be aware of all this stuff. You know, how do you get to Starbucks and have a cappuccino? If every barista you recognize from like the Punic Wars when they poisoned you, whatever. So, but back to the idea of experience, and people ask for a lot of proof. And Jennifer and I, we've been doing our podcast we've been meeting up for 8 years every week. It's uncanny, but we've been doing our podcast for 2 years. And what I found with her is that I ask a lot of questions like you do. You're somebody who interviews people, and I do that too. And so I ask her a million questions. And what I realize is she's a bit of her filters are down, because I think we were talking about it on the podcast yesterday. She had a thing that happened when she was a child, and it her filters were burned. Let's put it that way. So her filters have always been down. She's always seen people. When she sees them, it's translucent. It's not like they're sitting there in front of her, but they are, and she can hear them. And then she's translating what she's hearing. And that's key, because, people go to see a medium and they're like, well, they told me that this would happen. They're translating what they think they're getting, of course. And mistranslations happen all the time. But if you're working with somebody who is very honest about this is what I'm getting, you can take the information that they're getting and then apply it. Especially when you're talking to, let's say, a medium, and they go, your father, his heart stopped. And you're thinking, no, he was in a car accident. And of course, both are true, because that's how you do crossover. But what happens is, because we kind of push that thing down, I say to people, don't judge what you're hearing. Just write it down or record it, and then do a little research. One of the most uncanny things, I have a forum on Quora called Hacking the Afterlife. And it's just, I built it so that people could share experiences with the afterlife. And other people could see that, hey, that's not so weird. But this one guy, I'd given him this meditation, take 10 minutes of imagining your mother sitting across from you at a table, but take 10 minutes doing it. I mean, picture her, clothing, everything about her, jewelry, whatever, and then ask her a question. And he did that. And he said, I asked her, okay, Mom, who greeted you on the other side? This guy was a full skeptic, as he had put it. And he heard her voice, which was uncanny for him because he hadn't heard it in 10 years. And she said a name, Hugh Nessel. He heard the name, and he was startled that he could hear her voice, but he also had no idea who that was. So he did an internet search. He looked everywhere. He looked through family papers. No, he couldn't find anything. Then he started asking people randomly, have you ever heard anybody called Hugh Nessel? But then he talked to his sister, and his sister went, yeah, that's her maternal grandfather. This guy didn't know that. His mom knew that. She said the name. And eventually he figured that out. It was new information. So it's partially it's to realize, look, they're not going to give us lottery numbers. They don't want to ruin our lives. We've had a path that we've planned. We're not aware of it, but a play that we've actually worked out in advance. Not everybody has free will, so they don't do what they're supposed to do. That's why people can't predict lottery numbers, because everything changes. But generally, they won't tell us things. They can't cure things. They can't fix things, but they can give you advice. They can answer science questions, which is mind-bending. A scientist that you really want to know, well, what about this? You can ask them. And my thing was, when I talk to people about this, I said, just don't ask once, ask 3 times or ask 10 times, and then have somebody else ask. So I use hypnotherapy, mediumship, and guided meditation to access the same information, and sometimes all three. So if somebody's doing a hypnotherapy session and I'm filming because the hypnotherapist asks the questions, I'm not a hypnotherapist, but I'm in the back with a camera, and then something is said by the person doing the hypnotherapy, then I might take that detail, that fact that somebody said, and to a session with Jennifer Schaefer or another medium, doesn't matter, and say, I'd like to ask about this sentence. What does this mean? And then I get information from that same person on the other side, talking in more in depth, right, with somebody else who's translating it. And then finally, I'll do a guided meditation with someone where I'll say, and hopefully they know this, but they could be, let's say, a science student, and they've read the book of the person that was being asked. And I'll say, let's do a guided meditation. Can you invite him to sit across from you? Let's ask him this question. By doing that, it's not that, I'm verifying the answer. I'm showing that anybody can access this same information. You see?
Your role in the hacking the afterlife is you provide the guided meditation. Is that correct?
Well, it's what I've been doing now. So I'm a filmmaker. I've been filming people under hypnosis. And then about 8 years ago, I started working with a medium who works with law enforcement. So I know how effective she is. And I started filming those interactions. I have 12 books. So we did 4 books together, Backstage Pass to the Flip Side, 1, 2, and 3, Tuning into the Afterlife. People that showed up, I was also a music critic at Variety. So I had a lot of musicians that I had interviewed or talked to showing up, talking to us about their journey. And sometimes people on the other side asking me to deliver messages to their family. And I always say, look, you deliver your own message. It's not up to me. And then they argue with me and say, well, but, would you please do that? And I say, okay. And so then I find a way to, track down their children or whatever. And then I write them a note and say, you don't know me from Adam. Apologies as if this is upsetting, but this is what was recorded. And I don't share it with anybody else. And then I've had about half of those people have said, oh, that's great. I'm so glad to hear this. And about half say, I wish I talked to my loved one every day, but I don't think you are. And I write back and I say, okay, thank you. Message delivered. And then when the person shows up again on a podcast, I'll say, hey, what'd you make me do that for? And then they'll say, they'll get it eventually. They'll figure it out eventually. Anyway, when we started our podcast, I mentioned something to you. I said, our people on the other side found this quite often in the research. People on the other side manipulate events. We call them coincidences. Sometimes you're driving along and you hear a song, or you open a drawer that you looked in 1,000 times and like, oh my gosh, there's that thing I was looking for, and now you're thinking of them. Sometimes people see it on clocks, 11:11 on a digital clock. The truth is, no one prior to digital clocks went around going, it's 11 minutes after 11. But they do now because they see it and they get a ping. It's almost like their loved ones are saying, hey, pay attention. Either I'm thinking of you, or I want you to think of me, or I want you to do something for yourself, whatever. I had somebody explain the 11:11 phenomenon in a very unusual way. This woman had a dream, and this person was asking, well, how can I talk to you? You passed away 20 years ago. I don't understand. How are we communicating? And the person in the dream said, think of 11:11. If you think of 11 as like a fence, and then there's like a fence in the middle, right? On one side of the fence and the other side of the fence, they have to slow down their frequency or energy exponentially to be able to pass a message across. And we have to elevate our energy, our frequency, maybe in a dream, maybe hallucinogens, whatever, hypnotherapy, guided meditation, so that we can have a conversation. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So is there kind of like a one size fits all for everyone, or is everything very
Well, would you like
tailored?
to, how much would you like to try to do a little mini meditation here, my dear?
I would like that a lot. Yes.
All right. Listen, I'm not a licensed hypnotherapist. I'm not anything other than a goofy filmmaker who happened to stumble upon what I call a very unusual way to talk to people on the other side. It's detailed in the book Divine Counsels in the Afterlife. And the introduction has this guided meditation I'm just about to show you. And the book is clergy, scientists, guy from Harvard, neuroscientists, doctors, people that I gathered together who the only thing they had in common is that they had done guided meditation, which to me means they had bypassed the filters on their brains for whatever reason by doing a guided meditation, seeing things, hearing things that aren't in front of them. And so that's all they had in common. And I asked them if they would do an hour Zoom session, and we did that. And I expected that percentage-wise, some would and some wouldn't. I didn't know what it would be. It turned out all of them did. And so I don't know if it was the simplicity of the meditation. I don't know if it's because their guides were waiting for me to talk to them. It's possible, but all of them did. And so the book has pretty mind-bending things of them talking to their counsels. So I'm going to show you a very simple method, which it's a precursor to going further. Like behind you, you've got the great deep space. I'm saying let's just go to the outer rim of the atmosphere. But if you want to, and I've been doing this now with people, Martini Prods, Prods, Martini Prods at Gmail. You can reach out to me if you want to do a guided meditation. Okay, I do it. I take a donation, but whatever. That's kind of what I've been doing lately. Okay, enough about me. Let's go to you. And so I'm going to say to you, Tia, I want you to picture yourself in a boat on a river. It's the Beatles song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Picture yourself in a boat on a river. You can close your eyes, keep your eyes open, doesn't matter. Tell me, what does the boat look like?
It's a small boat. It's brown, and it's a sailboat.
Sailboat. And is it new or old?
It's older.
Okay. Does this seem familiar? Have you been in this boat?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay, new information. Take a look at the water around you. Is it lake, river, ocean?
It's a river.
River, okay. Not fast flowing, I hope, because I want to keep you in place here.
No.
I also say to people, I just only interesting, happy memories. That's all we're interested in accessing. There's no reason to go down another path. So right now, placid, happy, beautiful day. What's the sun look like?
It's bright and shiny, blue sky, lots of sunshine.
Okay. And now I'm going to ask you, can we invite your guide or a friend or a loved one to come and sit across from you in this boat? And who do you see? Is it a male, a female, or a light?
Male.
Male? About how old?
30.
30? Is it somebody you know?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And so in this, describe what this person's wearing.
A blue button-down plaid shirt and khaki shorts.
Cool. He's ready for fishing. Let me ask you, and what's a letter that we can use to refer to this person?
T.
T, the letter T. All right, very good. And so let me ask you, Mr. T, are you familiar with me or what I'm doing? It's important to realize that our loved ones, everything G said was so right on the money. Portals, photographs, how to contact people, how to not take things so seriously that you can't move forward in life. How love is the only real thing that we retain. I mean, that was really, really profound. And thank you for allowing me to invite G to talk to us about it.
And so when people do that, do they have physical sensations? Because I felt very hot.
Yeah. Well, yes, of course. And you think about it, like, where's the sensation coming? Is it coming from them or is it coming from me? What I'll sometimes do is I'll ask, like, you were able to hold hands at some point. And I think that's important because I don't know if you, maybe we didn't get to that, but sometimes that's important to say, hold their hand, and you don't have to converse because you're learning something from them, while you're holding their hand. I mean, it can be very profound. People, and sometimes I'll ask, can you put a sensation of love in the person who's seeing you? And then that becomes, so you can always go back to that sensation. Was there a pleasant sensation somewhere in there?
It's very pleasant the whole time.
So now you have that in your memory bank. You can flip that switch at any time. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Flip. Not stressed at all. You can always go to that place. Always. Because it exists. It's, I've heard this so many times. We think of here and there, here and there. They're here. We're there. It's all love. Let me just say, when people do these guided meditations or hypnotherapy, but this is not that. This is just a guided meditation, and anybody can do it. But don't go driving after your guided meditation, because you're readjusting. It's almost like you took the filters off. And may I compliment you at being able to allow yourself to have a conversation. I mean, look, you're on the air. This is your show. I know you're aware that you're on the air and you're aware of all these things, but you also allowed yourself to just experience whatever was coming through. I couldn't see anything. I don't sense it. I don't see it. But I've done this enough times to know what questions to ask. And I think I'll compliment myself by saying, I realized immediately that somebody that you knew that had crossed over, that it would be emotionally difficult to have, a conversation. It's always hard. Somebody you love is over on the flip side, and you see them, and it's like, I can't really ask you a question. But if we have their friend show up, somebody they know, the friend can just talk away because, there's no connection there emotionally. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that I learned that. I just learned that today. I realize that now. I mean, that showed me that that's effective. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. That was incredible. I've never experienced anything like that. And so this is something anyone can do, and they don't actually have to have you, but it's helpful, right? Is that correct?
Oh no, they don't need me at all. I did have somebody reach out to me from Canada, and she said, Richard, you don't know me at all. I'm not, I'm not even in your country, but I can't go to sleep unless I hear your voice. So I thought that was funny. So she listens to my book talks and my books on tape and stuff like that, and falls asleep. I thought, oh, that's terrible. People, but no, what I'm doing is the thing that makes me a little unusual is that I kind of go where the window opens. And so I've traveled all over India, and I've been to Tibet, and I've learned guided meditation from Robert Thurman, Uma's dad, who was a Tibetan monk. He doesn't do this, but he does he does something that's much more connected to the Buddhist philosophy, blah, blah, blah. But I know that med means measure in Latin, and measuring your thoughts, like letting go, measuring what you're seeing. That's just a form of prayer. It's also a form of conversation. Just picture yourself in a boat on a river. It's not hard to do. And that's where John Lennon came up with the title, because they were studying, meditation. And somebody had suggested that that was a valid way to go somewhere. And anyway, and so my life has pushed this all into this thing of like, anybody can do this. You don't need me. You don't need anyone. And then we heard from G, like, how do you know it's true? Because that's really the main thing. Because while you're meditating, you see yourself on Mars, and you're thinking to yourself, well, that's not possible. How could that be? The answer he gave was, when you get, I gave the answer and he agreed, but then he gave an example, the soccer, you can get the answer before you think the question. I gave that example, but you see what I'm saying? And so sometimes people will say, I'll start to ask a question and they'll say, I'm seeing green ice cream, mint. And then I'd say, well, the question I was going to ask is, what is it you miss about being on the planet? And then that was their favorite ice cream. You see, something as simple as that. It just shows that there's a connection. You know, you could argue it just shows that we're open to unconscious so that we can access these answers. Doesn't matter if the answer is accurate, doesn't matter how we got there. Whether somebody on the flip side told us, you know, how to fix the planet or we thought it up ourselves, both are effective. Why not?
Is this, would you call it channeling?
You know, I do have friends who are channelers. I do have friends who are mediums. I'm doing the quote thing because we have nomenclature to describe so many things. We talk about aliens. We talk about, you know, different forms of gray. We box everything up. I think the most simple way to talk about this is to say we have filters on the brain. Some people bypass them. Some can, some can't. Some do it directly, some do it in a dream, some take hallucinogens, DMT, ketamine, whatever, LSD. Some do it that way. Some people got bonked on the head when they were a kid and they see things that other people can't. The filters are askew, you know. So it's just another way to put it. So is channeling any different? No, than, you know, mediumship. Channels will tell you it is, or whatever, however their process is. But ultimately, it's lifting the filters up or lowering them so that you can access this information. You see, so I don't know. Channeling is more related to I'm hearing these things and I'm not judging them, and to me, that's inappropriate because not inappropriate. It's not the right word, but it's less than informational because there are some hypnotherapists who do that. Like their clients go, I'm on the dark side of the moon and there's a colony there. And then they write that up as if there are colonies on the dark side of the moon instead of asking the client the question, what moon are we talking about? Are we talking about the Earth's moon? Are we talking about another dimension? Is this Earth now or before or in the future? And when you're channeling, you need to ask or have somebody ask questions to the person you're accessing, because that's how you parse information, because they're translating what they're getting. Like for of the most famous channel, let's say I can think of is Seth. You know, Jane Roberts was this woman who started channeling a person on the flip side. And I'd like to point out Seth is not omniscient, but he certainly has had many lifetimes and understands many things. But for me, there's no reason somebody has to change their voice while they're talking to somebody off planet. And if you go to YouTube, you'll see Jane channeling Seth. And it's like they start talking with an unusual thing, but no one's questioning them. I mean, the classic thing is people will say there is no time in the afterlife. You've heard that, right? And what I've heard is it's so relatively different that you can't comprehend it. And G said the same thing, like waking up, falling asleep. What I've heard is imagine all time like a string, and all of your lifetimes are on that string, and they go from left to right, and one follows the other. Otherwise, you wouldn't learn anything. It would be like Groundhog Day. However, if you turn the string to your eye, you can see all of the lifetimes simultaneously. So it looks like there's no time. You can see how one life affected the other, like 3D chess, different games being played simultaneously. But we experience things here on the planet in a linear fashion, and there is linearity over there. And as Dr. Grayson noted, it's like you have people sequentially see things. Like I saw my mother, then I saw my father, then I met so-and-so, then this happened. It's a sequence. So there is a linearity to it, even though they go, it feels like there's no time. But again, it feels like is the key part of that phrase. So that's from a channeling, people saying, well, the channeled entity goes, well, there's no time. And what they're really doing is they're talking to a kid in a sandbox. And the kid in the sandbox is saying, is time real? And the answer is it's too complex to explain to you, kid. But for your purposes, there is none, relatively none. You see what I'm saying? I mean, it's silly, but it's the best way I can explain it. So there is time on the flip side, and channeled entities aren't always accurate because people are translating what they're getting, just like Italian to French to German to English. So, does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And so there could be like cloudy filters too, where you're not getting an accurate picture of what's coming through.
Well, I think so too. And then, of course, this has been the bugaboo about hypnotherapy, which is people assumed, scientists that I've met, they assumed that bias would come in because of your religion, your beliefs. And so therefore you would see Jesus, if you're a Christian. And if you were not, you would see somebody else. That's not in the data. That's not in the research. What is in the research is that, let's say, near-death experiences, 70% experience something. 1 to 3% experience something negative. That's where the cloudy filters come into play. Because when they experience those negative things, if you go back and ask them about them, the experience dissolves under further review. Like asking them, why are we here? Then it dissolves and they realize it's a construct. Percentage-wise, 15% of all near-death experiences see Jesus, whether they believe in him or not. So they could be a complete atheist, skeptic, doesn't matter. They're seeing a person and you can say, like, is he wearing a name tag? How do you know it's him? So, but in my case, he started showing up. Jesus started showing up in the research early on. The first book, Flipside, somebody recalled living in that era. And at the first I was like, I didn't want to offend anybody. So I just left it out of the research. I wouldn't talk about it. And then the book Hacking the Afterlife, about a third of it is the reports. And then finally, the former head of Paramount Studios asked me to write up a book of just the interviews of Jesus. It's called The Greatest Story Never Told is Told by Jesus and Those Who Knew Him. And these are dozens and dozens of people who are atheist, skeptics, Hindu, doesn't matter what their religion is, seeing Jesus, and then me saying, just like we just did, can I ask him some questions? And I ask the same questions to him or whoever it is they're seeing, to see if the answers change. You see? So it's that thing of like, oh, if they believe, then their answers would stay the same, but they don't. He says the Bible's metaphor. All religions point to the same garden. You don't have to follow me, but let me walk beside you as we walk each other home. He talks about unconditional love, but he's talking about it from the frame of 85% of the people who have a near-death experience source or God, and they say you feel indescribable joy, non-judgmental acceptance, or unconditional love, a little bit like you just felt. And they feel that like 1,000,000 times or 1,000 times more. They experience that. So does that mean religion is accurate? Not in the research that I've seen. There's no religious belief system that I've run across or talked to people on the other side, like, which one we follow. They all say it's just not accurate. You see how the stage is constructed once you leave the stage, like G said, instantaneously. Oh, it's a construct. But that being said, 85% of the people who have a near-death experience report feeling these things. And my point is, you can do that if you want to. Now, you don't have to be on the other side. Clearly, we could talk to people that you haven't. I mean, did you know G?
Not very well.
But you knew who he was, but you didn't know him very well. And here he is having a conversation, talking about soccer on the flip side.
Yeah, that was weird. The soccer.
Not weird in my world. Well, listen, I've talked to people golf all the time. And so the question is, how do you do that? They construct the golf courses out of places they've been. And just like he said, you start constructing a golf course and a game, people show up. It's like a signal goes out. You said exactly what so many other hundreds have said. You're not aware of it, but I am, just because I remember what people say. But I was just talking to somebody like 2 days ago who was talking about playing golf, and you know how the tees, the tee can be anywhere. It could be in Hawaii, and you're thinking about trajectory, and you're constructing the math of the swing and the hitting the ball. And so, and same thing with soccer, you got to create the ball and you got to create the field, and then other people show up. And G said he never played soccer when he was alive. So what's going on? You
Yeah.
know, why would someone? It's not something that they really desired to do, but they get there and they're like, "Hey, this is fun. I think I want to try this." You see, whatever. For some people, it's too mind bending. All I can say is, think of listening to what Tia's experienced as a taste. You know, like a nice glass of lemonade on a hot Georgia evening
Inside.
inside without the skeeters.
Yes.
Or get a bug thing. Get one of those zappers. And every time you zap, you say a little prayer. I have sent you on your path. On the flip side. It's funny because the Dalai Lama, I met the Dalai Lama. He's a hilarious guy. Well, hilarious. I mean, I think he is. But he said that thing of like, you know, if you really want to test your ability to be compassionate to all beings on the planet, have a mosquito land on you. So you're sending them to their next lifetime. And, you know, they understand purpose. And listen, the most unusual part of this research is I've had a number of conversations with animals. And the animals on the flip side say consistently, different people seeing an animal, and I'll ask the same questions. And they say, look, animals understand incarnation. Humans do not. They understand the process of coming and going and coming and going, and even switching to different species. Humans don't do that. They come back as humans. I mean, people argue about it. I mean, there are extreme rare cases of somebody, you know, coming as a dog or a cat or whatever, but it just doesn't happen the way people think it happens, you know, in movies and stuff. That's not reported because people don't understand how consciousness functions or incarnation works, but animals do. And how about that? They know something we don't know. Mind bending.
What's the best way for my audience to reach out to you if they need a guided meditation or they just need some more information?
More information, Rich Martini, that's me, .com. richmartini.com has links. I apologize, the page is kind of messy, but links to all of my books and all of my audibles and all the movies and all the stuff. And our podcast at Hacking the Afterlife on YouTube is a lot of fun. You can hear somebody who's really good at it, Jennifer Schaefer on the flip side. And to do a guided meditation of like we just did, shoot me an email, martiniprods, MARTINIPRODS @gmail. And I'll set something up. We do it on Zoom and then I record it and then I send, you know, people a copy. In this case, Tia has her own copy.
I do.
And please send me a copy, would you? So I can
I
transcribe
will.
it later.
Yes, you'll be the first to get it.
Very good.
Well, thank you so much. If you had one message that you wanted to leave the audience with today, what would it be?
The one message is that love is all there is. And somebody said it the other day, everything is going to be okay. It's all right. The guy said, it's all space right. Repeated that. I get it. It's all right. Let it be. And when you're having a difficult time, just put on Paul McCartney singing Let It Be and listen very carefully to what his mother was saying on the flip side, which is, it's all going to be okay. You know, Paul, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Everything will be fine. That's my message. Love, love.
I'm headed to listen to the Beatles.
Very good. Thank you so much, Tia.
Thank you very much. This was just wonderful for me. Thank you. I
I'm so
appreciate
glad.
it.
I'm glad we got a chance to talk to your family and friends because it was clearly important to do so.
Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.